uncontacted tribes. Like, do you know about the gentleman who was the missionary who visited North Sentinel Island and was killed by the natives? North Sentinel Island, which is a really unusual place because they branched off from Africa 60,000 years ago, and they've been living on this one small island the size of Manhattan.
By the 21st century, it might look like all the world's mysteries have been solved, but that's not the case. There are still some unbelievable civilizations still untouched, and one of such mysterious places on Earth is North Sentinel Island.
And as well as we know, there's only about 39 of them left, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And we're not supposed to contact them. Like, people are not supposed, we're supposed to, like, leave them alone. And they're a rare tribe. When they find them in the Amazon, the uncontacted tribes, our initial instinct is back off.
However, Joe Rogan, a famous communicator in his recent podcast, was shocked by what's hidden on North Sentinel Island. What's happening on the North Sentinel Island, and are there secrets hidden within the Forbidden Island waiting to be discovered? Join us as we unravel the shocking discovery that lies beneath this island. North Sentinel Island. North Sentinel Island is one of the many islands in the Indian Ocean. It's not very big, covering about 60 square kilometers. However, this island is completely off-limits to everyone. Tourists, nearby residents, and even scientists are not allowed to visit. The reason this place is so strange is not due to dangerous animals or a curse. It's because the island is home to one of the most unique groups of people on Earth. Between 15 and 400 people live on this small island, but the exact number is hard to determine. The local inhabitants cannot read or write, so there are only guesses about their population. Scientists can only make guesses and watch from a distance, as modern tools like satellites are not very helpful. The island is covered with thick forests, making it impossible to see anything beyond the shore. The dense vegetation hides everything on the island, leading to wild speculation. Some imagine it could be hiding anything from living dinosaurs to traces of an alien civilization, or even the lost city of Atlantis. Very little is known about the people living on North Sentinel Island, known as the Sentinels. The Sentinelese are one of the original peoples of the Andaman Islands, and they've lived almost entirely cut off from the rest of the world for around 60,000 years, according to scientists. Over this immense period, they've developed on their own without any contact with modern society. They don't know about Bitcoin, global warming, or Netflix, and they don't even recognize what a horse is. Some researchers have had brief glimpses of the Sentinelese people and described them as relatively short, about 5.5 feet tall. This shorter stature may be due to their island environment. They have dark, shiny skin, even teeth, and strong muscles. Despite the many centuries that have passed, the Sentinelese still live as hunter-gatherers. They likely use bows, arrows, and spears for hunting land animals and gather seafood like crabs and shellfish by hand. Their living areas are filled with empty shells, suggesting they eat large amounts of seafood. Many of their ways of life have remained unchanged since ancient times. The Sentinel people do not farm, but they can build canoes. It's interesting to note that we aren't sure if they know how to make fire on their own, even though they do use it. The Sentinels live in small, temporary huts and value metal items, enjoy dancing, and speak a language that no one fully understands. Scientists are very interested in learning more about them, but studying them is against the law. North Sentinel Island is officially governed by India, but there is no agreement between the government and the Sentinelese people. The Indian authorities make sure not to disturb them because their isolation means they have no immunity to common diseases. Even a brief encounter could spread illness quickly and be fatal for the tribe. In the 19th century, British officer Maurice Vidal Portman studied the Sentinel people in a very inhumane way. He kidnapped 6 of them and took them to the nearest city. Unfortunately, the captives soon became ill, and 2 adults died. Portman eventually returned 4 sick children to the island, leaving them on the beach. Even though there have been many attempts to reach out, the tribe on North Sentinel Island has managed to stay isolated. Today, the island is carefully protected to keep diseases from the mainland from spreading to its inhabitants. Indian Border Patrol boats make sure no one gets within 9 kilometers of the island. The Sentinelese people purposely avoid contact with outsiders and react aggressively if someone comes too close, sometimes even using violence. There have been a few peaceful encounters with the tribe, the first one happening in 1991. However, visits to the island stopped in 1997 after the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake. An Indian government helicopter flew over to check on the people, but it was met with stones, spears, and arrows, proving the tribe was safe. Scientists think the tribe's hostility shows how well-preserved and stable their way of life is. Despite official restrictions and dangers, people remain fascinated by North Sentinel Island and continue to be drawn to it. On October 2018, a 26-year-old American man arrived in Port Blair, the capital of the remote Andaman Islands in India. Port Blair was not his final stop, though. He spent the next 11 days there in isolation to make sure he was free from any infectious diseases. His ultimate goal was both straightforward and incredibly challenging. He wanted to bribe local fishermen to take him to a place that felt like another world entirely. Port Blair is a modern city with over 140,000 people, a major naval base, and numerous flights to other parts of India. It's well connected globally, with flights from New York City costing under $2,000 and from London costing less than $1,000. But just 50 kilometers west of Port Blair is North Sentinel Island, a place that seems like a remnant from humanity's ancient past. The island is so covered with dense forest that it's practically invisible from above. North Sentinel Island is home to the Sentinelese, a small tribe of hunter-gatherers who have lived in isolation for tens of thousands of years. They remain completely unaware of the outside world and live using only basic tools like bows and arrows. Their way of life is essentially unchanged from 20,000 years ago. Despite being so close to the modern city of Port Blair, the Sentinelese know nothing of the advanced technology and daily life that exists just 50 kilometers away. North Sentinel Island stands in stark contrast to the modern world, and this isolation has made it a rare living example of humanity's distant hunter-gatherer past. Although the tribe has remained untouched by the advances of modern civilization, people have still attempted to interfere with their way of life. A tale of isolation. Over the centuries, many people have tried to reach out to the Sentinelese tribe, but all their efforts have failed. The Sentinelese react aggressively to any intruders, seeing their attempts as a threat, much like we would react to an alien invasion. To respect the tribe's wish to stay isolated, the Indian government has set up a no-go zone that extends 3 nautical miles around their territory. This area is watched over by the Indian Navy. In 2018, a 26-year-old American named John Allen Chow tried to enter this restricted zone. His goal was to introduce Christianity to the tribe, a mission that ultimately led to his death and may have had unknown effects on the Sentinelese. Chow's tragic attempt made global headlines and became one of the most talked about events of that year. To fully understand the story, it's important to know how the Sentinelese people became so cut off from the outside world. At first, it was thought they came directly from the earliest modern humans who moved from Africa to Asia about 50,000 to 75,000 years ago. However, new research indicates that humans arrived at the Andaman Islands around 26,000 years ago, during the last ice age. At that time, lower sea levels created land bridges connecting the islands to what is now Myanmar. As the ice melted and sea levels rose, the Andaman Islands became isolated, stranding groups like the Sentinelese who lived as Paleolithic hunter-gatherers. For thousands of years, they remained mostly isolated. Sometimes, kingdoms and empires from India and Southeast Asia might have sent expeditions to the Andaman Islands for diplomacy or to capture slaves. But we have no solid historical records to confirm these events, so we can't be sure how often they happened. The indigenous people of the Andaman Islands lived as hunter-gatherers, isolated from the outside world, until 1789. That year, a British ship arrived, exposing them to a broader world for the first time. The British wanted to set up a penal colony for convicts who had rebelled against their rule in India, which eventually led to the creation of modern-day Port Blair. When the British arrived, there were about 7,000 indigenous people on the Andaman Islands, divided into various tribes such as the Shompen, Jarawa, and Sentinelese. This British arrival with Indian prisoners was similar to when Christopher Columbus brought the first Europeans to the Americas in 1942, introducing diseases like measles, influenza, and smallpox to which the indigenous people had no immunity. This led to devastating effects similar to those experienced by Native Americans. Additionally, the introduction of alcohol and opium, substances unknown to the indigenous peoples, worsened the impact. As a result, the native population of Great Andaman, where Port Blair was established, was quickly overtaken by newcomers from the outside world. Most of the indigenous survivors either assimilated or were pushed out. The Jarawa tribe in the far south of Great Andaman and the Sentinels were different from other tribes because they stayed mostly isolated on their island. No one from the outside world had met them until a British Raj merchant ship accidentally crashed there in 1867. The 106 British and Indian survivors of the shipwreck reached the beach, believing the island to be empty, and waited for rescue. However, 3 days later, naked islanders appeared from the jungle and attacked them with arrows. Even though the crew tried to defend themselves, they were eventually rescued by the Royal Navy. This violent encounter marked the first contact between the two worlds and shaped their relationship for the next 150 years. Portman Expedition to Sentinel Island. In 1880, a 19-year-old English nobleman named Maurice Vidal Portman was chosen by the British government to manage the Andaman Islands and run the Port Blair prison colony. Interested in the people living on North Sentinel Island, Portman led a trip to try to make contact with them. For days, he and his team explored the island, trying to meet the Sentinelese people. Despite their efforts, the Sentinelese stayed hidden, only showing up briefly as they moved through the jungle. Eventually, Portman's team found an elderly couple and 4 children. In a controversial move, Portman took them back to Port Blair. Sadly, the elderly couple became ill and died from diseases they were not protected against. Realizing his mistake, Portman returned the children to North Sentinel Island, bringing them gifts as a sign of goodwill. In his journal, Portman reflected on the trip and admitted it was a failure. Instead of creating understanding, it had only increased the Sentinelese's fear and hostility towards outsiders. He concluded that it would have been better to leave them alone and not interfere with their way of life. Ideas are suggesting that Portman's poor management of interactions between our world and the Sentinelese might be why they have stayed hostile to visitors. This idea seems more believable when you consider the 4 children he took from the island and then returned. These children might have shared stories about the deaths in their community, possibly blaming outsiders for the tragedies. Additionally, the children could have unknowingly brought back diseases that infected the tribe, leading to deaths. Without much understanding of infections, it's understandable that the Sentinelese might have blamed outsiders for these mysterious illnesses. Over time, these stories could have turned into exaggerated legends, warning against trusting any future outsiders. Portman visited the island several more times in the late 1880s, but the Sentinelese strongly defended their independence with great hostility. In 1896, an Indian convict who escaped from a penal colony on Port Blair made his way to North Sentinel Island on a makeshift raft. When a British search party found his body on the beach a few days later, he had been killed with arrows and his throat cut. This was the first known case of the Sentinelese killing an outsider, just a few years after Portman's visits. This act sent a clear message. They did not want any more contact with the outside world. There were no more visits from outsiders until World War II. When the Japanese occupied the Andaman Islands at the end of World War II, they stayed there for 3 years. It's hard to know exactly what happened to the islanders and possibly to the Sentinelese during this time because the Japanese destroyed all their records before they surrendered in 1945. However, we do know that the Imperial Japanese Army committed many brutal acts in other places during the war. In Port Blair, for instance, at least 10% of the population before the war died under their rule, and many were tortured. The effects of the war even reached the remote North Sentinel Island, though it's unclear if Japanese soldiers visited there. After the war ended in 1947, India became independent from British rule. The Andaman Islands, including North Sentinel Island, became part of India, making the Sentinelese technically Indian citizens. But since the Sentinelese had never heard of India and didn't understand what being an Indian citizen meant, the Indian government decided to try to make contact with them. They expected this task to be very challenging given the Sentinelese's isolation. Untamed Island Encounters. In 1974, National Geographic sent a film crew, along with armed police and a team of expert anthropologists led by Pandit, to North Sentinel Island. Their goal was to make a documentary called Man in Search of Man about the Sentinelese people, who had very little contact with the outside world. Some of the footage they collected is still the only film we have of the Sentinelese. The plan was to sail around the island for 3 days, leaving gifts on the beaches to try to gain the trust of the islanders. However, when they approached through the barrier reef, the Sentinelese came out of the jungle and shot arrows at their boat. Undeterred, the crew moved to a different part of the island and left more gifts, including a toy car, a doll, aluminum cookware, coconuts, and even a live pig. Again, the Sentinelese appeared, and one of them shot an arrow that hit the director in the thigh. The shooter then laughed loudly. To show their feelings, they separated the doll and the pig, buried them in the sand, took the coconuts and cookware, and retreated into the jungle. The documentary project was eventually abandoned, and National Geographic withdrew to avoid making things worse. Despite this, Pandit was determined. He continued to visit the island for years, leaving gifts in hopes of making friendly contact. He and his team made many recordings of the tribe during their visits. In 1975, Pandit took the King of Belgium on an overnight cruise near the island. The sight of the ship must have been confusing for the Sentinelese. They eventually found the shipwreck and used its iron for tools and weapons, marking their move to the Iron Age. The remains of this wreck can still be seen on Google Earth. By 1988, Pandit saw a Sentinelese man dancing happily after receiving gifts. A month later, during another visit, Pandit's team delivered bags of coconuts and saw some Sentinelese approach them on the beach, coming within 10 yards. This was a big step toward building trust. In 1991, Pandit sent junior anthropologist Morala Chattopadhyay for a routine gift drop. During this visit, the Sentinelese waded into the water to accept their gifts for the first time. Chattopadhyay thought her presence as a woman might have helped make the tribe more trusting. The following month, Pandit and Chattopadhyay visited the island together and were amazed when about a dozen Sentinelese rushed out to greet them. A notable photograph was taken of Pandit and his team from the modern world, standing in the water with the uncontacted Sentinelese, each holding a coconut. This moment was the result of 24 years of Pandit's efforts to make friendly contact. Afterward, Pandit and his team left the island, thrilled with their success. In 1992, at age 58, Pandit faced mandatory retirement and never returned to North Sentinel Island. Shortly after, the Indian government banned all future visits to the island. A no-go zone, 3 nautical miles wide and watched by the Indian Navy from Port Blair, was set up to protect both the Sentinelese and any potential visitors. However, this did not prevent all intrusions. In 2006, 2 Indian fishermen accidentally drifted into the restricted area while fishing illegally. Their boat ended up on the island's beach. Other fishermen reported that the Sentinelese approached the boat with hatchets and killed the 2 men. A helicopter was sent to investigate, but the Sentinelese drove it away with arrows. Allegedly, the Sentinelese later hung the bodies of the fishermen on bamboo poles on the beach as a warning to outsiders. The deaths were never investigated by Indian authorities. No one visited the island again until late 2018, when an American Christian missionary, unprepared for the risks, repeatedly attempted to reach the island. He too was killed by the Sentinelese, and his body remains there. This makes him at least the 4th outsider whose remains cannot be recovered. The Indian government has granted the Sentinelese full legal protection for their actions, including killing anyone who tries to visit. Thus, it's safest to stay away, as visiting the island is not worth risking your life or exposing the Sentinelese to diseases. They have consistently shown that they wish to be left alone, and their wishes should be respected. The island is off limits for good reasons, much like the Prime Directive from Star Trek. The closest you can get to seeing it is from an Air India flight into or out of Port Blair, which may fly over the island, offering a glimpse into another world. Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands, often called India's tropical paradise, are a group of islands that promise visitors a magical experience. Here, you'll find stunning turquoise waters, vibrant marine life, pristine landscapes, and enchanting forests. The plants and animals in the Andamans are unique and rare. Beyond the breathtaking natural beauty that draws millions of tourists, the islands also have a fascinating history that is surely captivating. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a union territory of India, are a fascinating collection of 572 islands. While many of these islands are inhabited, some remain untouched and wild. This territory consists of two main groups: the Andaman Islands and Nicobar Islands, separated by the 150 kilometers wide 10-degree channel. Interestingly, these islands are the peaks of a submerged mountain range, the Arakan Mountains, which lie hidden beneath the sea. The best time to explore these islands is from October to May, when the weather is comfortable with temperatures ranging between 23 degrees Celsius and 35 degrees Celsius. If you want to dive into the local culture, plan your visit during the annual Island Tourism Festival, a 10-day extravaganza held mainly in January. Here, you can experience tribal dances, art forms, and even magic shows. For ocean lovers, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands offer an adventure like no other. This wonderful place has some of the world's most beautiful islands and must-see spots. It's full of history from one angle and an adventure lover's paradise from another. There is so much to see and do in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Near Port Blair, several beautiful and popular islands will leave you amazed, but none can match the quiet and relaxing charm of Neil Island. Visitors love this island for its incredible variety of life: white sandy beaches, clean coral reefs, and lush tropical forests. Away from the busy crowds, Neil Island is perfect for a weekend escape. Ross Island is rich in history, much like how Neil Island is associated with peace. Once called the Paris of the East, it was named after British marine surveyor Daniel Ross. The island is home to the ruins of a former British settlement, and a tour here feels like a nostalgic journey back in time. Elephant Beach, located on Havelock Island, is another highlight. It's famous for its colorful coral reefs and exciting underwater sports. A short 20-minute ferry ride takes you to the beach, where the stunning shore will leave you in awe. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands are famous for their exciting adventure activities, making them a must-add to your travel plans. Many visitors come to the islands just for the excitement of water sports. If you're eager to see and touch the colorful marine life up close, Andaman has many cheap options for you. Havelock Island and Neil Island are especially popular among scuba diving fans. Once you dive into the water, you'll feel weightless, entering a whole new world. You'll be surrounded by schools of fish and sea creatures as you explore. There are only two spots in Andaman where you can experience sea walking: Elephant Beach and North Bay. The fascinating underwater world, full of beautiful corals and many sea animals, will amaze you when you go snorkeling. Some top spots for snorkeling include Elephant Beach, South Button, Tamarind Camp, Neil Island, Kalapur, and North Bay Island. Pick the one that suits you best. The trekking paths in Andaman are just as lovely. You'll surely fall in love with the green forests of the islands. Chidiatapu and Kalapahad are some of the best trekking spots in the Andaman Islands. Walking through these trails will make you fall in love with the forests and paths. The peacefulness of the islands is perfect for refreshing your body and mind. Mount Harriet National Park, located in Port Blair, is a green tropical evergreen forest that started as a reserve. It is home to 7 endangered species, making it a haven for wildlife lovers. Parrot Island near Baratang is a must-visit for bird lovers, especially those who love parrots. Sipigat, Chidiatapu, Fararganj, and Havelock Island are excellent places for bird watching, where you can see and hear a variety of birds. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands are full of stunning sights. One of the top attractions is the Cellular Jail, which offers a glimpse into India's history under British rule. This jail, also known as Kala Pani or Blackwater, was used to imprison political prisoners from India and Africa. The name reflects the fact that the ocean was the only escape route, making escape nearly impossible. Baratang Island, situated between South and Middle Andaman, is rich in natural beauty. It features mangrove creeks, beautiful beaches, limestone caves, and mud volcanoes, creating a breathtaking landscape for visitors to explore. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands are easy to reach by both plane and boat. You can fly into Veer Savarkar International Airport in Port Blair from Kolkata or Chennai. If you prefer traveling by sea, regular ships sail from Chennai, Kolkata, and Visakhapatnam to Port Blair, with the trip taking about 50 to 60 hours. There are a variety of options for travelers with different budgets. For budget travelers, daily expenses, including food and travel, are about 2,000 INR. You can stay in simple, eco-friendly huts or concrete cabins. If you have a mid-range budget, you can expect to spend around 3,500 to 6,000 INR per day. This includes staying in comfortable rooms, eating at local restaurants, and using public taxis to get around. For those who prefer luxury, the daily cost is above 7,000 INR. This allows you to stay in 5-star hotels and top resorts, dine in fine cafes and restaurants, and travel in privately hired vehicles. Whether you're on a tight budget or ready to splurge, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands offer something for everyone, making it a perfect destination for adventure. The main foods in the Andaman Islands include rice, coconut, spices, and a lot of seafood. Being a group of islands, Andaman is a paradise for seafood lovers. You can enjoy delicious dishes made with cuttlefish, crabs, lobsters, prawns, and the popular red snapper. It's also a great place to try different types of cuisines. Don't forget to stay refreshed with some coconut water. For a cozy stay, you can check out hostels like Kanchan's Nest, Bluebridge Homes, and My Andaman Sports Hostel. You can choose to share a room or get one just for yourself. If you prefer hotels, some top picks are Hotel de Pebbles, Hotel Palika, Havelock Farms Resort, Senses Havelock Resort, Reef Atlantis, and Ashiana Residence Inn. For a luxurious experience, consider staying at the Havelock Holiday Beach Resort, Lush Green Retreat, Symphony Samudra, Beachside Jungle Resort and Spa, Seashell Neil, or Taj Exotica Resort and Spa. To make the most of your visit, plan a trip of 5 nights and 6 days to see the main sites. If you want to explore at a relaxed pace, a 9-night and day trip will allow you to enjoy all the islands and activities. Now, it's time for today's subscriber pick. Joe Rogan was shocked by what was hidden on North Sentinel Island. On North Sentinel Island, untouched by modern life, stories whispered of an old treasure guarded by the island's fierce people. When Emma, a brave archaeologist, found a forgotten diary, her heart raced with excitement. The diary, written by a shipwrecked sailor in the 19th century, hinted at a hidden temple deep in the island's jungle, said to hold untold riches and magical artifacts. Determined to uncover the secret, Emma gathered a team of daring explorers. They sailed to the Forbidden Island under the cover of night. Guided by the sailor's mysterious notes, they navigated dangerous terrain and avoided the Sentinel tribe's watchful eyes. Deep in the thick forest, they found the temple, its stone walls covered with puzzling carvings. Inside, the air buzzed with an otherworldly energy. They found not just gold, but relics filled with ancient powers capable of controlling the elements. Just as they grabbed their prize, the ground shook. The island, it seemed, was alive, protecting its secrets. With the treasure in hand and the temple falling apart around them, Emma and her team fled, leaving the island's mysteries forever intact, their discovery only adding to the mystery of North Sentinel. What mysteries still lie hidden on North Sentinel Island? Let us know your answer in the comments section. The Jarawa tribe. The Jarawas are a native tribe from the Andaman Islands in India. They live in the South and Middle Andaman Islands, with a population of around 250 to 400 people. The Jarawas have mostly avoided contact with outsiders. So much about their culture and traditions remains unknown. However, since the 1990s, they've started interacting more with the outside world. By the 2000s, some Jarawas regularly visited settlements to trade, meet tourists, get medical help, and send their kids to school. Recognized as an Adivasi group in India, the Jarawas, along with other indigenous people, have lived on these islands for thousands of years. Historically, the Andaman Islands were seldom visited by outsiders, and the Jarawas mainly interacted with other native groups. Over the years, their contact with the outside world has greatly decreased. The Jarawas might have descended from the extinct Jangil tribe, which disappeared around 1931. They are considered a scheduled tribe in India and have been in the Andaman Islands for over 2,000 years. Unlike the Greater Andamanese, who now number only 59 and live on Strait Island, the Jarawas have clear linguistic and cultural differences. The Jarawas are thought to be among the first groups to move out of Africa, and evidence supports their long isolation, which helped them survive despite modern influences. Today, the Jarawas are one of 4 remaining tribes in the region, alongside the Great Andamanese, Sentinels, and Onge. They have a reputation as skilled hunter-gatherer fishermen and strong defenders of their land. Before the 19th century, they lived in the southeast part of South Andaman Island. Their population declined dramatically after British colonizers arrived in 1789, bringing diseases to which the Jarawas had no immunity. Despite suffering from disease and war, the Jarawas remained a united tribe. In the 1970s, the building of the Great Andaman Trunk Road through their territory increased contact with outsiders, leading to trade and disease outbreaks. Although many Jarawas kept their distance, some began interacting more with settled populations, learning new languages, seeking medical aid, and even attending schools. The Jarawas are nomadic, hunting wild pigs, lizards, and other animals with bows and arrows. Recently, they have started keeping dogs for hunting. The ocean is crucial for their food, with men fishing using bows and arrows and women catching fish with baskets. Their diet includes mollusks, dugongs, turtles, fruit, tubers, and honey, which they collect from the forest. The Jarawas receive monthly allowances and wages from the Indian government for taking care of citrus fruit plantations. However, the construction of the Great Andaman Trunk Road and other developments have threatened their way of life. Lawsuits have been filed to protect the Jarawas from intrusion, and court rulings have prohibited further road extensions and relocation programs. Despite regulations, illegal tourist activities continue, with visitors often trying to interact with the Jarawas. In 2013, the Supreme Court of India temporarily banned tourists from using the trunk road through Jarawa areas, but later allowed limited travel due to the road's importance for local villagers. The struggle to balance the Jarawas' protection with development continues. What are your thoughts on the intriguing discovery of the hidden secrets on North Sentinel Island by Joe Rogan? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section.